This all comes down to one really simple question. How deep is this draft? It's guest week, day 2. Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cardinals, Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter, Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, free wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Go to the YouTube channel. Search Locked On Arizona Cardinals. Hit that subscribe button, man. We're in that weird time of year where it's like December 27th. Nobody knows what day it is. It's not New Year's yet, but Christmas is over. The draft is ever approaching. I picked the brain of Mina Kimes yesterday, which was fantastic. She always does a great job. I only want to bring trusted people on this show when I share my time. And one of my favorites to bring on, Marcus Mosher, not only the host of Locked On Cowboys, but the host of 48 different things on 48 different platforms. 33rd Team, among others, draft, football nerd, and everything in between. Marcus, what's up, dude? Thanks for joining me.
Of course, following Mina Kimes is tough, but we'll do our best to have a really good show today. Yeah,
she's a friend of the show. She's fantastic. I grab her twice a year. I really don't like to overstep it, but she looks at the game a different way, which is what you want. You look at things a different way. I look at things a different way, and that's what makes all of this so good. So we're going to talk about the Cardinals in the final segment, okay? But I want to do a ramp up with this with my listeners and my viewers to kind of get a different approach on the draft from your side, where you are a draft dude this time of year. Second segment, you also host Locked On Cowboys. The Cowboys have had one of the better offensive lines since their 3-year Super Bowl run in the early 90s up until the Zeke time. And now with things shifting a little bit, I want to get your thoughts on how important the offensive line is, because I think the Cardinals should go offensive line at 16. So this is self-serving, but you're going to be a great vessel for that. But first, like, full draft hat. A lot have said between 25 and 70, you can get value. First, second, third, day 2 is going to be a massive day for talent. It's not just going to be a top 45 draft. When it comes down to this compared to other years, how deep is this draft? Like, is this draft really that much different?
So that's an interesting question. I think it depends on the position. I know that's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but
not really.
Let me say it like this. So one of the things that I do every year is I take the top 10 NFL draft experts, and you know all the names, right? Mel Kiper, Daniel Jeremiah, Dane Brugler. And what I do is I compile a consensus board, right? And I have all their top 100 boards, you know, with a little bit less than a month to go to the draft. And right now, just using their top 100 boards, I have 142 different names that are listed inside the top 100.
Yes.
Which is the most I've ever had. Now, does that necessarily mean the draft is deep? No, but there's a lot of different names that are going to be considered in the second and third rounds, where maybe that wasn't the case in previous years, where I think in this draft, you could take a player who, you know, is 38th on somebody's board, and they might not even be in the top 100 on another person's board. So we're going to see some wild selections on day 2 and early day 3 of the draft. And I think if you're a team like the Cardinals and you need offensive line help, I think that's good, because you might get some runs at other positions early ahead of you, where some pretty good players fall to you where you're drafting.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. See, those are numbers. And please, at Marcus_Mosher, he color codes me, makes it very dummy proof. Yeah. He makes it very, and I say that in the
I'm a dummy. I have to, right?
Right. But it's, some people do it poorly. Like, there is no way you're not going to understand exactly what you're looking at when you look at these things. You tweet about what, a couple times a week?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're constant. So I'm constantly seeing this. So please check that out, because if you want kind of a dummy's guide to what he just described, it's very simple. Well, it's hard work for what he does. He makes it look very simple. So, you know, before we get to position groups in the next segment, I'm talking to people. I had a Damian Parson, you know, a lot of people that I trust in our Locked On space and elsewhere, a lot of smaller school guys that can make massive impacts. While that's every year, if you're a good football player in college, they're going to find you, whether it be the Senior Bowl or otherwise. When you're looking at a big board, when you're looking at name familiarity, do you kind of throw the small school thing out the window if they're being talked about with Pub to go in the first 2 rounds?
Yeah, and I think we've done a better job of a draft community of getting tape on some of these small school guys. I mean, it used to be really hard to get tape from even lower like Division I schools, but we just have a lot more exposure. We have a lot more analytics. So a guy like Gray Zabel, the North Dakota center guard,
Right.
I mean, we've been talking about him for months now, and we've got PFF grades. We got to see him at the Senior Bowl. So you always worry about the competition a little bit, but with Zabel, he's currently inside the top 32 of the consensus board. It's just not that big of a deal compared to what it was even 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, he's being mocked to the Cardinals at 16. Like the fascinating part about a draft like this is like, and this is obviously the nuanced part of it. It's never an exact science and everything like that. There can be like 30, I mean, and the bust rate is regardless of position is always going to be there in the back of your mind. But like when you have 32 picks between your first or your 31, whatever, depending on trades, do you take your dude at 16 and then at 47, you're like, well, at least maybe you reached 10, 15 picks too high at 16, but you got your dude. And that guy from North Dakota State is the dude mocked at 16 where he probably goes in the 20s. But if the Cardinals want to get their guy who can back up Yalta Frold, who you messaged me about, I believe, after the Cardinals signed him, and you have your interior offensive line like Swiss Army knife, you take your dude at 16, you just hope that he's there. You have to move up to get him, move up and give draft capital, move back up from 47.
Yeah, so this is we could have a long conversation about this, but there's always been this feeling in the draft community that in the first round, you just take the best player available. And I understand that. I think for the most part, you want to be just taking the best players. So you don't want to be reaching because you have a need. However, there is a part of the draft that we don't talk about enough that it's called sequencing, where it's like, hey, we might be taking this guy 2, 3, 4 spots early, but if we wait to the second round, there's just not going to be any guys within a round close in grade. So maybe for a team like, let's use the Zabel argument, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you take him at 16, I understand it, because if you're looking at the interior offensive linemen, specifically the guys that can play center, they're just not going to be there in round 2 and maybe not in round 3. But if you need defensive end help, I think you're much more likely to get a guy in round 2, whether that's like a Jack Sawyer, James Pierce, who's falling quite a bit on the consensus board.
Seemingly.
There's going to be guys available when Arizona's on the clock in round 2 that you feel great about at defensive end. That might not be the case when it comes to the center. Actually, it won't be the case. There's not a center that's going to be available when the Cardinals are on the clock in round 2 that you feel good about at all.
They went through that with Darius Robinson last year because he may have been a reach at 27, but he wasn't going to be there in the second round when they picked. And that was the guy they wanted. And that's the guy they're going to get. Like, if it fits the scheme and it fits what they need, it's like, who cares about what everybody else thinks? Like, I equate it to exactly what you just said. I equate it to a fantasy football argument. It's like, listen, I'm drafting on the turnaround at 12 in my fantasy football. I know that this guy is not going to be there when it comes back to me, so I'm going to take him now. Like, I struggle a lot, Marcus, with comparing the Cardinals to the plight and journey of other organizations, what other organizations have done, because everybody's on their different rung of the ladder. So with the Cardinals, they've made such leaps and bounds this offseason by just making a couple different moves and retaining, some in-house housekeeping that they can draft whoever the hell they want and it's going to be validated unless it's a tight end.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest mistakes we make as like football analysts, I'm talking about us as a whole, is looking at previous Super Bowl champions or participants and saying, okay, they did it that way, so we have to do it the exact same way. When you look at like NFL history, that's not the case. A lot of times the teams that are making it to the Super Bowl are doing things completely different than the way the rest of the league is doing it, and they're being forward thinking rather than being reactive, right? And I think the Cardinals are maybe starting to be a little bit more on the forward-thinking path. And listen, if they can nail this draft, have a couple of guys developed that they drafted last year, I don't think they're that far away.
See, this is, and let's pivot to, the history of the Cowboys as it pertains to the Cardinals next with the offensive line. But you're right, like, you and I have been doing this for almost a decade with Locked On, okay? This is the first conversation you and I have had around draft time where there's actual evidence that the Cardinals are moving in the right direction. And that's something that is a massive jump that I try to strangle politely people like look at what's happening in real time. It's not the past. It's not the future. It's right now. And I think the offensive line should be addressed at 16. And let's talk about how impactful that's been for the Cowboys organization. You host Locked On Cowboys. Marcus Mosher, Locked On Cowboys, Pro Football Focus, 33rd team. I can't do all of it. It's only a 30-minute show. We'll be right back. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. March Madness, baby. Woo! It's been a good one, and it's really unfortunate with, the Cinderella stories not being there. And, hey, guess what? Maybe there's better basketball because there isn't. So we can debate that at a different time. Either way, FanDuel's giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, even though they're few and far between, but they're still there. And even who's cutting down the nets. Dude, you want to pick the future of who's going to win the NCAA tournament? Good luck, but you're able to do it at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the action for all the college hoops, baby, all tournament long. Marcus Mosher, thanks for hanging out. So, dude, let's go into your backyard here, and then we're going to infuse it into the Cardinals situation currently. Up until, I don't remember the time that it happened, but there was a time when people didn't talk about offensive linemen, and then they did. I think it was like the mid-2000s where it's like, oh, let's start paying these dudes and not give Matt Ryan $40 million before he takes a snap. I think maybe that was the impetus for this, and it's like, well, for about 10 years prior to that, Emmitt Smith was running over the world. Troy Aikman was all world. Michael Irvin was all world. And if you ask anybody, any historian, you'd say the offensive line was the most important cog in that machine. I think you'd agree. How important is the offensive line, Marcus? Let's start basic with that. And then we can talk about how I'm right about it.
No, of course. It's you build your team through the trenches, right? You look at historically, it's very hard to find Super Bowl champions or teams that have been successful for multiple years in a row that have had bad offensive lines, right? And again, I just don't see that changing. I know I said at the beginning, you need to be forward thinking. That seems like it's going to stand the test of time. If you have a good offensive line, it's a floor raiser, right? You're just going to be a solid team every single year. I remember, Alex, when the Cowboys back in 2011, they were projected to draft an offensive lineman, and everybody was saying, well, Jerry Jones doesn't draft offensive lineman. He only likes sexy players. And they ended up drafting Tyron Smith in 2011, Zach Martin Travis Frederick 2013, Zach Martin 2014. They ended up taking Tyler Guyton. They took Tyler Smith. So the Cowboys are a team that have historically spent a bunch of picks on their offensive line, and you can understand why.
It's just, it's not it's become sexier, especially around the draft where it's like, oh, they've got their bookend tackle for a decade. On top of all of that, the importance of it all, it's I call it I'm not sure if I brought this up to you. I say smart things once a month. That's my quota. I call it the Nate Solder effect, where a large chunk of big money free agent offensive linemen go to a new spot and crater. And he went from the Patriots, where he won Super Bowls, to the Giants, got all of King Midas's gold, and we never heard from him again.
Nope.
And that's something, especially on the interior, Marcus, what Carolina has done over the last two off seasons. It's they bent their salary cap to overspend. The Bears did it also. It's just draft a dude and develop him. And he makes $11 a year for the first 5 years if he's a first rounder.
So let's have a conversation about drafting round one offensive lineman, because I think one of the things that Dallas has done really well, and there hasn't been a ton, but they have done something well, is when they draft first round offensive linemen, they are taking players that were tackles in college, right? Now, Tyron Smith was obviously a tackle. Zach Martin was a tackle at Notre Dame. Travis Frederick was a pure center, so that's the outlier. But Tyler Guyton was a tackle. Tyler Smith was a left tackle at Tulsa. And they'll take those tackles and move them inside if needed, right? Because you look historically again at all the guys in the last 15 years that were guards only coming out of college, almost all of them have busted, right? The hit rate's really low. So I think that's what's interesting for Arizona here. if they're dead set on drafting an offensive lineman at 16, I would think it would need to be somebody who has tackle flexibility, because if it's not, and it's a guard only or a center or only, that's where it gets a little harder.
Got it. Yeah, and I that's really astute, because my biggest fear, and I've talked about this a lot with, and I don't think that many are saying offensive line should be the pick. I think it's pass rush, interior defensive line, like traditional powers that the Cardinals need. Even though I don't think they're that far off from either of those positions currently. If Yaldavralt goes down, the Cardinals don't have a backup plan. Like, it could be, it could be Evan Brown, could be John Gaines, who they got, the swing guy from UCLA from a couple of years ago. Like, solidifying a swing guy that you can get, like, and that's really interesting about the tackles. I didn't know that. I mean, I don't follow the Cowboys like you did. I mean, there's going to be tackles there. There's going to be Josh Simmons they can reach for. I mean, Justin Fry, the offensive line coach, is now the offensive line coach for the Cardinals. You got Paris Johnson Jr. I just don't know if it's a too high wire of an act to draft an offensive lineman at 16 when you can go get a world beater to be with Darius Robinson inside and Delvin Tomlinson, or to be with Josh Sweat on the outside. I just don't know at this point.
Well, here's the thing is, having a great offensive line is really important. We talked about being a floor raiser, but that doesn't mean that every offensive lineman on your team needs to be a first-round pick either. And this is where Dallas has gotten in trouble, right? Dallas has had some really good offensive lines, but they've devoted so many resources to that unit, like high picks and big money, that it's left them thin elsewhere. At some point, yeah, it's good to have a couple high first-round picks. And if you look at the Eagles, again, let's use them. They had Lane Johnson, who was a first-round pick, Mekhi Becton, who was a first-round pick, but they didn't spend a first-round pick on him, right? They signed him. Landon Dickerson was a second-round pick. Cam Jurgens was a second-round pick, and Jordan Mailata was, I think, undrafted seventh-round pick. So they only spent one high first-round pick, and that was back in 2013 in Lane Johnson. So it's important to get talent, but it doesn't always have to be first-round talent. That's where it is up to your coaches, your offensive line coach, to develop those guys. That's why I'm really happy that the Cowboys have hired, a former offensive line coach to be their new offensive coordinator. It's really nice.
If you follow him at Marcus_Mosher, that is very apparent. So before we pivot to putting your just football fan-ish, national brain on in the final segment, where would you go if you were the Cardinals at 16, barring any sort of trade back or trade up or anything like that?
Yeah, I think it would be really appealing to go with a Gray Zabel, right? Because you are protecting the interior of the offensive line. I get that. But I also think if you look at like the money 5 positions, quarterback, wide receiver, edge rusher, corner, defensive tackle, I think the edge rush talent is just going to be so good at that range, whether it's a Mike Green, a Mykel Williams, a Shamar Stewart. That's probably where I would land. Arizona's defensive line, I think it's got the right pieces. They got, they obviously signed Josh Sweat. They brought in Dalvin Tomlinson. They moved Zaven Collins to more of an edge rusher role. Mm-hmm. But go make a strength stronger, right? Like if you add a Mykel Williams or you add a Mike Green, now we're really cooking. Like now we're actually building a defensive line that's going to be a problem for opposing offensive lines. And all of a sudden now the Rams, Matt Stafford is going to have to get rid of the ball extra quick because he doesn't want to get hit. I think that's probably where the value lines up best. But if I were the Cardinals and I were Monty, I would be aggressive at going up and getting one of these offensive linemen that maybe fell. You get down to 30, 35, go up and get your guy if you think he's there. But I think the edge rusher spot is where, or just let's say defensive line. I think that's where the value is going to be the best for Arizona.
At 16, yeah. And one last thing, and I know that this is going to be fleeting, so I'm getting this out now. Will Johnson's not going to drop to 16.
Probably not, no.
What you've seen, and this was the catalyst for me doing a segment last week, was where you talked about the big board that you put together that you compute. Will Johnson was in the top 10 across the board. Like Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football, like he's been our boy for a long time. He started with Locked On. He was the first one that mocked Will Johnson to the Cardinals. If Will Johnson's there at 16, is that a no doubt about it? You have to make a strength stronger, like you just mentioned.
Yeah, and I've seen some people mocking Will Johnson like into the 20s, and maybe that's just because they don't see a clear fit. But again, you look at the top 10 draft experts, his current like average ranking is 10.3, and there's multiple people that have him inside the top 10. Corner is one of those money 5 positions. And Alex, this is just a position that's not deep in the draft. Like there's just not a lot of good corners.
Mm-hmm.
I would be shocked if he fell to that spot. But I was shocked last year that Terrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell fell to the 20s. So it wouldn't be totally surprising either.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, again, the overarching theme here is the Cardinals are in a good spot at 16, and they can do whatever the hell they want without fracturing the future. And that's a beautiful place to be in. So how close are the Cardinals? I'm going to ask Marcus Mosher. He's right there. Next. Please go to the YouTube channel, search Locked On Arizona Cardinals. Hit that subscribe button, man. We are in full swing in guest week. I am on a beach somewhere right now. I'm shattering the fourth wall. Shattering. I might be in a rainforest in Puerto Rico. I don't know where the hell I'm going to be, but I'm not going to be here. But I'm gracing you with 5 very, very smart minds from people that I trust, and they'll babysit you until I get back. So, Marcus, Josh Sweat, Dalvin Tomlinson. I told people at the end of last season that the Cardinals' defense was really far away, but they're 2 moves from being right there. And they got 2 dudes that they're giving less than $60 million combined over the extent of their contract. 2 guys who are plug and play, ready to rock, both of whom have connection with the coaching staff. They brought in Jacoby Brissett, who I think was one of the more underrated signings. They did the housekeeping, re-signing some dudes. How close are they to a playoff push, like really a bona fide playoff team?
I think for you to be a playoff team, especially in the NFC, you need to have at least 7. Blue chip is strong, but like 7 impact players. And I look at their roster, and let's count them: Kyler Murray, Paris Johnson, Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., Josh Sweat, and Buda Baker, right? Buda Baker, excuse me. That's 6. I think you're 1 away, right? Or maybe you get that player through the draft. Maybe somebody develops, like maybe Xavier Collins finally breaks out, or maybe Jonah Williams finally gets healthy, or maybe Trey Benson just becomes that running back that they thought they were getting in the 3rd round last year. If they have one of those things happen and everybody stays healthy, there's no reason why I don't think they can compete, especially in the NFC West. Like, it's a pretty old division that they're playing in right now, and I think this is the youngest of the 4 teams. I think you're only 1 draft away from competing for a Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I think Garrett Williams would probably be that guy, the leader in the clubhouse, to be 7. But I do need an outside corner still. Sean Murphy-Bunting just isn't the – I mean, you're right. They're close. And I think the impact maker, another one who I know you loved, who every single person I talked to after the draft loved the pick, was Dadrian Taylor-Demerson, 4th rounder from Texas Tech, who is going to supplant Jalen Thompson as a strong safety to go alongside Buda Baker. They're like the Spider-Man pointing at each other meme. They're the same dudes who play, a tweak of a different position, but pretty much the same. And I agree with you in the sense that on paper, this is the most complete roster we've seen, period, since 2000, with the future pacing, expectation that what happened last year will improve this year. Kyler Murray's the big question. And it's kind of one of those, this is the year, or you're going to be talking about different things. Do quarterbacks change after 6 years? Like, I'm a Kyler dude. Like, I'm a Dak guy. Like, the floor that's having a floor that high, Marcus, is like most quarterbacks suck. Most quarterbacks are not good at football. And this is different. Tell me, is Kyler enough? Is Kyler enough?
So I am biased here because I think Kyler is enough. And whenever we've seen a fully healthy Kyler Murray for like a whole season, whether it was 2020, 2021, or 2024, I think that's a top 12, top 13 quarterback in the league, right? And I think he's progressed as a passer, despite being in some pretty bad situations with either young receivers or no receivers or some shaky offensive lines. I think he is enough. Now, here's one of the things I really like about Arizona compared to like some of the other teams that we talk about. it seems like the timeline of these players lines up well, right? Kyler's still under 30. Marvin Harrison's extremely young. Trey McBride's extremely young. Josh Sweat is still very young. You have Darius Robinson, who you're hoping really breaks out in year 2 and can stay healthy. This is not an old roster. So if they can continue to stay healthy and stay together, and they can keep this core, this like core 6 together, and just add in outside pieces, it does feel like they are trending in the right direction to be a perennial, I don't want to say Super Bowl contender, but a perennial contender in the NFC West.
Just relevance.
Yes.
That's all this fan base wants. That's all rational, functional relevance. Yeah. And I think you're right. Like 2 years ago, ain't no way Dalvin Tomlinson or Josh Sweat wanted to come play here.
No.
Like that's not I call it passive income. When you do the right things as an organization and you play the right way, even though they won 4 games 2 years ago, free agents see that. It's not just wanting to play golf and living in the desert. Like they see, they only need a pass rusher. Kyler Murray, look at this quarterback that I just came from. I'm good. Let's roll. Like it's just relevance in the NFL is fleeting.
Yeah.
It's not. It could be, you get national TV. Like it's the Cowboys' relevance is it's a dictionary definition of, irrespective of if it's earned or not. Like the Cardinals have been a not fun organization a lot of the time to watch for various different reasons. And this feels different.
Yeah. This is something that let's say like the non-premier teams in the league, like again, the Cowboys are going to be a premier team, whether they're good or bad. That's not what I'm talking about. But some of these teams, let's say like the Raiders or the Jaguars or the Titans, what you want to be is competent. And so many of these franchises and organizations aren't. And it's so hard to get to the competent level. But once you get there, that's when all these other opportunities and avenues open up where, hey, players will want to come play for you because, hey, this is an organization that knows what they're doing. It seems like they're functional. It's not players asking out all the time for trades. And it seems like we are inching towards that. And again, this is why I love the draft. You're only one draft away from ever becoming a functional organization. Look at the Washington Commanders, right? That was the most dysfunctional franchise in the NFL. It took one draft, and now everybody wants to go play in Washington. That's the beauty of the NFL.
Well, let me ask you one more question as we get out of here. How I've described Monty Fort down since being hired is you've got, when you go to a wedding and there's inclement weather and it's in just a fat tent outside. Mm-hmm. Monty Fort down is a big tent in the middle of State Farm Stadium. And the dysfunction of Michael Bidwell is reigning around it, but they're protected because of the damn tent. Yeah. That's a big change in Washington. Dan Snyder's gone. Adam Peters came in. They've got a new ownership. Magic's there. It may as well be rebranded as the 33rd NFL team. Can the Cardinals win with Michael Bidwell like the Cowboys are struggling to do at this point, even though Jerry Jones has seemingly the best intentions in mind always?
Yes, because even as dysfunctional as the Cowboys have been, they're able to be a successful franchise, right? Before this year, they had 3 straight 12-win seasons. Mm-hmm. And as Jerry Jones likes to say, they were hanging around the rim. The ball bounces a couple different ways. They're in an NFC Championship game. They're in a Super Bowl. Like, they've given themselves good opportunities. I certainly don't think Arizona is so far gone where they have no chance of winning under the current administration. Like I feel like the Jets are at right now, where the Jets are just never going to be successful with the way that their ownership is set up. I don't get the feeling across the NFL that the Cardinals are viewed anywhere similar to that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Michael Bidwell has done everything he said he was going to do since removing the last regime, like to a T. So we'll see. Marcus, you've got however long you need to tell people where you are.
Locked On Podcast Network. That's it. At Marcus Mosher on Twitter, at Locked On Cowboys, Locked On Dynasty. Go check them out.
Tyler Drake tomorrow from Arizona Sports as guest week rolls on. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Remember, without you, there is no me. I'll talk to you tomorrow.